I'm always really nervous at clapping before you've said anything. I might sort of hold on till the end and then see if it's deadly silence. No, I know it'll be noisy at the end because I've got a great panel joining me. So whatever I say, and I'm only going to talk for about 10 minutes or so, whatever I say, they will definitely add to the end of the session. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a real privilege for me to be here today and to give you a sort of little bit of a walkthrough. And I offer nothing more over the course of the next 10 minutes or so than just some thoughts which I hope will spark some conversations both today for the panel and also in the sort of months that come with it. The topic that I've got is, you could probably write a PhD on it. So what I'm not intending to do over the course of the next 10 or 12 minutes is to do that. What I will do is, I think, just try and touch on some highlights and run through some of the things that we're particularly thinking about at the moment. What has been really helpful is to hear from this morning already a range of really consistent themes coming out in what I'm about to say. So I hope that sort of reinforces where we are. My sort of aim for today is just to look at some of the thoughts of Defence's workforce for the future. Why it matters to Defence, what we're doing, and very candidly, how you can help in this room. In terms of setting out the challenge, whilst the character of conflict, I think we would all agree, will continue to change and evolve, the nature of warfare itself, we believe, remains unchanging. At its heart, it will remain a human contest of opposing wills. In spite of the ever-shifting landscape of modern warfare, the need for really capable, competent, and committed people remains central to maintaining a competitive advantage against our adversaries. However, the contest to recruit those people who provide us with the necessary competitive edge to keep us right at the forefront of the sort of armed forces has never been more ferocious, and I don't need to tell many of you in this room. With demand for key skills and talent far outweighing the supply in the population. What's more, the uncertain state of global affairs has lent an extra potency to the need to employing and developing people with the right skills and motivation to excel in the future, as the outlook for the next 20 years looks even more precarious. National shortages in key skills such as programming, cyber, nuclear, healthcare, and engineering expertise currently stand at a 15-year high, with I think 77% or so of employers reporting difficulties in recruiting these specialisms. From a defence perspective, this has translated into significant pressure across all three services in generating the talent we need in these areas. We see this as one of the most pressing and urgent challenges, with the need for effective partnerships both within the defence community, across government, and crucially with the private sector serving as an alliance to sort of get after this war of talent. I'm just going to focus on three, what I might call the sort of global drivers as we see them. Nothing that I'm going to offer you, I suspect, will be new, but what I do want to do is just highlight three with a particular potency for defence. The vast technological changes we have experienced in society over the last 20 years or so have transformed our idea of what we value from our workforce. Currently, the global labour market is experiencing a seismic shift towards automation, artificial intelligence, and digitization. This shift, as I don't need to tell any of you in this room, has resulted in a growing demand for employees with key skills such as scientific, technological, engineering, and mathematical versatility. As businesses and industries have increasingly adopted new technologies to remain ahead of the market, so too has defence sought to remain a leading voice in the development and use of cutting-edge technologies that confer on us operational advantage both on and off the battlefield. However, whilst we have traditionally grown and developed our people from within, the speed of technological change risks leaving us exposed as others are able to adapt to new digital environments more quickly and exploit our weaknesses where we have been slow to change. As we look ahead at the future risks that are likely to emerge as the natural evolution of the technological context in which we find ourselves, these are going to be pressures that endure. In parallel with this trend towards an ever more digital world, we are seeing changes in our national demography. that will require us to adapt who we are as an organisation in order to remain attractive in the eyes of tomorrow's soldiers, sailors and aviators. Over the next 3 decades, British society is likely to become ever more ethnically and culturally diverse. We have a really rich and proud history of recruiting from a wide pool of people, and will continue to ensure the image of defence is one that reflects the makeup of our society at large. But we're also aware that we can, should and must do more to appeal to the widest cross-section of society as possible. Furthermore, the demands of what people want of their workplaces has changed drastically over the last few years, with flexibility and adaptability taking precedent in the minds of many. Hybrid working, once the exception, has now become the norm. Concurrently, attitudes towards institutions, organisational structures and hierarchies are changing, and individuals entering work in 2025 and beyond are likely to desire flatter and more networked organisational structures. These shifts in what people want of their careers represents a really bold challenge to defence, where we have traditionally valued collaboration, teamwork and cooperation, with the commitment to the organisation often taking precedence above and beyond the needs of the individual. As we look to the future, we are aware that this is a practice which we need to look at to redress to suit the needs of those we wish to attract. So what, and where does all this take us? How are we setting out our strategy for the future? To address these changes in the skills, the people, and the processes we need to remain relevant in the 21st century and maintain our reputation as an attractive employer for those seeking an exciting and varied career. Across defence, we are taking bold steps now to revise and reform as an organisation. At the heart of our approach lies a detailed review of the Armed Forces' future workforce. Led by Rick Haythornwaite, who many in this room will know from his time at MasterCard and Ocado, we expect his review to present recommendations in how we incentivise and manage our people from the day they walk into the recruiting office to the day they leave. And it represents the most comprehensive re-evaluation of Armed Forces personnel management in almost 30 years. And many of you will be familiar with the BET review that preceded this. The Armed Forces is a demanding and fast-paced organisation that can offer an exciting and varied lifestyle, offering excellent training, affordable accommodation, world-class healthcare, and a host of other benefits. However, these aspects of incentivising our people come with compromises that vary from person to person. And this has led us to look inwardly and ask what it is that motivates our people about the offer of an Armed Forces career so that we can better understand those who will sign up in the 2030s. We recognise that our people want to be managed and incentivised in a modern way that suits their careers, their skills, and importantly, their personal life. Coupled with this review is a reappraisal of how we maximise the talents and skills of our people. Across the Royal Navy, the Army, and the Royal Air Force, as well as the Civil Service, Defence has a wide, colourful, and pretty eclectic mix of specialists and generalists to call upon, ranging from engineers and mechanics to project managers and intelligence specialists. But whilst we have such a broad range of expertise within the single services, we have often suffered from stovepipe career management processes that have prevented us from exploiting these skills and expertise to their full potential. To rectify this, we are seeking to redesign the management of skills so that they are genuinely whole force, capturing talent and ability across the spectrum of the services and employing them where they are needed most. Our creation of the Pan Defence Skills Framework is our biggest step in establishing this change, representing a generational shift in identifying, defining, and managing the skills of our people. By combining expertise across defence, this framework will provide a single common language for skills which will help teams to be more agile and flexible. Ultimately, it will enable teams to deploy personnel where they are needed most, helping defence create the fighting force the nation needs for the future. This reform is complemented by ongoing work we are doing in recognising and nourishing talent. The development of our people remains a top priority for us. As such, we are reshaping our career pathways, and you'll have heard some of that this morning, to synthesise our traditional structures with transformative changes to enhance the skills our people have, as well as the workforce of the future. Traditionally, those wishing to become specialists in areas such as cyber or engineering have been required to join one of the services and be trained and managed according to their chosen service needs. Enabled by what we expect to come from the Haythorne-Waite Review and the Pan Defence Skills Framework, we will aim to implement new pathways for those seeking to specialise in STEM areas that places their skills and talents at the forefront of their career management, allowing them to shape their own career, their own future, as cyber or engineering experts first and foremost. Driven by the whole force approach, the existing divisions between regular and reservist, as well as the inter-service differences, will, we hope, be harmonised, with skills and capabilities supplanting cap badges as the primary means of maximising talent. Underpinning these reforms is a fundamental overhaul of the systems, technology, and processes that we use to manage our people. As we look ahead from the military we are now to the armed forces we aim to be by in the 2030s, we are transforming our human resource management and personal data analytics capability to streamline those business services so that they are genuinely world-beating and future-proof for the next generation of defence people. Adoption of this technology will enable strategic workforce planning to be conducted on a whole force basis as the data is centralised, common and available at the point of need. Already, we are seeing huge progress in this area, with trials demonstrating the data analytics work that would ordinarily have taken weeks being conducted in a matter of seconds. These changes are at the forefront of reforms we are making in response to the integrated review. Enhancing technological skills, harnessing data, transforming our skills base, and modernising our career management are vital themes that we recognise as key to guaranteeing our future success in the war for talent. But these changes are dependent not just on our own people, but on those within industry and the private sector who are able to bring knowledge, skills and experience where we need them most. We recognise that the talent we need and the training we offer sits within a national ecosystem of demand for skills. So whilst we are able to develop specialisms and expertise in many areas, we understand the desire for flexibility and agility from our workforce and our industry partners in satisfying their demands for key skills and experience. Our partnership with experts from scientific, technological, engineering, academic and consulting backgrounds has been integral to our success in delivering on our systematic changes to date. These strategic partnerships are vital to the work we do, and every one of our victories is indebted to the industry expertise, so much of it which is represented in this room today, which these groups bring to our organisation. And as we look ahead to the 2030s and beyond, we hope to continue to foster and nurture these relationships so that we can retain and strengthen our competitive advantage and reputation as one of the world's preeminent armed forces. I'll now invite the panel to join me on the front, and we will open up to your questions. I think we'll take them either through Slido or through passing a microphone around, but we'll sort of start there. While the sort of questions get going, I thought I might just ask Sam Humphris, who leads our people strategy team, just to share a little bit of an insight in terms of some of the lessons that we're drawing from Ukraine already, because there's a lot there. I know you've touched on it already this morning, but Sam, over to you.
Thanks very much, sir. My name's Sam Humphris. I'm Head Strategy for Chief of Defence People, and I've been in that post for 7 months now, having been Commander of the 1st Brigade in the British Army's Warfighting Division before that. So you would expect us to be staring quite hard at Ukraine and what it tells us, and clearly the national contribution to Ukraine is a fundamental thing. I suppose my personal conclusions about those lessons that we're drawing is that, you know, there are some that are new, but in many places they're echoes of things which are perhaps perpetual things, and others are on a trajectory that we already understood. So the things that appear to be new to us, but we're on that trajectory, I'd point to would be the pervasiveness of data, both the requirement to synthesize all source, all classification data, particularly through targeting, and that requires skills which will only become more important as we go forward. Connected to that is the fueling of that data is coming from sensors which are pervasive, and that means firstly that there's no sanctuary on the battlefield now, and actually survivability is connected more with your ability to either deceive or disperse or protect oneself. And that also equates to a requirement for the right to be able to fight. And what I mean by that is control and access of the electromagnetic spectrum is now much harder than has traditionally been the case. So the ability to organize access into the electromagnetic spectrum to either sense, to find, or to prosecute your effects is something which is not a given. You know, there's a constant contest going on there. The thing that I don't think has radically changed is the skill of the warfighter remains the requirement to integrate, to concentrate force. And as I think back on my time in the army, when I joined it, the skill was to try and synchronize fire and movement with air assets. That was the sort of the acme then. And of course, over the last 20 years, the access to other things, which you also need to integrate, is what technology has offered. So in particular, access to cyber and electromagnetic effects. You know, if you're when I was a company commander in Afghanistan and you were on the main effort, you'd be privileged with accessing extra capabilities. And of course, space and technical effects are now also loaded in there. But the fundamental skill remains the same. There's a whole series of people-related conclusions also that we're staring at quite hard. And again, I don't think many of those are new per se, but are reminders of requirements. The first would be associated with what we would call the moral component, and you've only got to look at the Ukrainian tenacious determination to endure to recognize how important that is. And you can compare recent other conflicts where the moral component has perhaps not been in as vivid supply as it is in Ukraine right now. The second thing I'd probably point to is the role of training, what I'd call sort of the axiom here. And when you're looking at some of the, particularly Russian poor performance, I would connect that to a product of failures within their training model. That might be because their behaviors are cretinous, their use of violence is uncalibrated, and that's perhaps because they've been brutalized through their own training, and then they behave to deleterious effect when they are fighting. And that uncalibrated use of violence has been to their operational ruin. The other things I'd sort of point to is their inability to combine arms, to do that integration that I talked about, and that's because of an absence of trust in their junior leaders. The Russian model is very centralized, both in terms of planning and execution, and that translates into an inability at a junior level to be able to problem solve and to be able to report accurately. It explains some of the infamous resupply and logistical issues that they have suffered. And then the final thing, I suppose, from a training perspective, I'd point to is the lack of thinking about it as a fundamental capability in its own right. And the second echelon have really struggled to wield any maneuver which is sophisticated. It explains some of the terrible casualty rates that they've been suffering because they haven't had the training engine to be able to supply that second echelon. Many of the trainers were committed in the first. So those would be the sort of some of the big handful things that I'd point to from that, sir.
Thanks, Sam. Now, not exhibiting any bias at all. I think the first question is from a Royal Engineer, so clearly that gets to the top of the list. So Simon Higgins asks, and I think I've been asked to read out the questions because I know we're streaming this as well. Simon Higgins asked, my company needs specialist engineers, logistics support staff and cyber experts. So does defence. Why don't we work together in recruiting them? That sounds like a perfect question for David.
Simon, thank you very much for the question. I'm Dave Tait, so I look after talent, skills, learning and development policy for all of the armed forces. That includes responsibility for recruiting at one end, through life development in the middle and resettlement at the other, and preparing people for life in the civilian workplace when they've finished their service. Now, actually, yesterday I was up at Ross Scythe having a meeting with the Defence Suppliers Forum where we were tackling this very issue about how we work better as a defence enterprise to attract and retain the talent we need, especially in STEM subjects, because it shouldn't be a competition. We should be working together. And I think that sort of journey starts in terms of trying to engage with people who are in education and maybe influencing the Department for Education to teach STEM subjects better. Because we need to begin this journey when people are probably 10, 11, 12 years old, just to open their eyes to what opportunities lie within the defence sector. Because while there's broad awareness that the defence sector is out there, I don't think there's much understanding of what we actually do in there and the range of exciting opportunities that lie within there. Then we probably need to sort of influence people and start having a better conversation with academia to make sure that they're teaching the sort of thing that we need them to understand, and areas such as computer science are falling way short of the mark at the moment. And then there's a bit about, I think, having conversations with people, both at undergraduate and postgraduate level, to try and attract them into the sector. And we could probably learn some lessons from the financial sector here, who quite aggressively target folks at university and open up pathways for them into careers into their industry. We don't. We wait till people have finished and then start trying to recruit folks. So I think there's quite a bit to get after at that front end, and at the rear end, when we're resettling people, we should absolutely be trying to encourage people to stay within the sector. And why not let people leave the military, go into industry to gain some experience, then come back into the military at a higher level so we can share those experiences. So that's just a few thoughts.
Can I
Zoe,
add to that? Yeah, please, thank you. Because there was a question on here about the mapping to civilian skills. And one of the key pieces of work that we're doing at the moment is a common skills framework. And the reason that we're really interested in that is that we need a common way to not only describe skills, but to manage them as well. And one of the things that we're doing is working with heads of profession and key skill areas within defence to come up with how we describe them, not only in a common way, but how they also align to external standards and frameworks where they exist. And I think by doing that, that will also enable our people to move into, out of and around the defence enterprise kind of much easier if we're using skills as the currency to do that. So it's a really big piece of work that we're doing, and we see kind of there's a whole host of benefits at the organisational level for doing that, but as I say, at the individual level too, and how we work with other organisations. So I think that really links to that question too. Yeah,
when we can accredit military training with a civilian qualification that's recognised by industry, we absolutely should, and that's certainly an aspiration.
I can, General, if I can, just add a point to Zoe's comment there. So I look after workforce planning in that whole force sense, and there was a question on whole force on the slide a moment ago. But whole force for us is, we've talked about the regular and reserves, and we've talked about the continuum of employment between, but that also brings into that workforce construct the civil service and the 58,000 folk we have in that area as well. And part of Zoe's work linking to a common skills framework and a taxonomy or a language that we all understand is the movement between of understanding where the skills exist in our organisation so that we can get the right people in the right place at the right time and make sure that we're efficient in doing that. How that plays across to industry comes in various areas of work, and I'd probably use the defence nuclear enterprise as a particular example, and a recent announcement on AUKUS yesterday of how we're working with industry to make sure that we don't compete in terms of those skills, but we work together to get the best thing for UK as a society, rather than just a service, military, defence, or just industry. So that relationship exists in that sense. Thank you.
You'd expect the panel to be in ferocious agreement, and so I'll join that sense as well. When General Eldon mentioned that 77% of UK industries point to the fact that they have struggled to access talent, and that's benchmarked, is my understanding, against a global average of 65. Forgive me, the other way around. So 65% UK versus the 77% in the books. And we know, so the things that are fundamentally difficult now, we have to stare at workforce requirements much further ahead than most organisations, because of the most of our workforce comes through the base-fed model. So if we require a particular skill at a middle management or senior leadership level in the 30s, we need to accept that that person is probably already within uniformed or civilian service within defence now. So we need to look much further ahead. Our understanding that we're pretty confident about is that those things which are acute now only become more difficult to obtain in the future. And so I suppose there's two bits to that in terms of our deductions. The first is that we absolutely must conceive of these requirements from a national security ecosystem, and we've got to embrace the fluidity in and out of service to access those scant skills. And then the second thing, of course, is that we've also got to assume agency and make sure that we're investing in the pre, and upskilling of people who are within the organisation, so that those issues that we're starting to see impact operational outputs now don't become very acute in the future.
Thanks, Sam. I might look to see if there are any questions in the room. Yes, please. Could you just hang on a second? Somebody's got a microphone that they'll come around. Just one on the second row, please. I'm also conscious, just while that's coming, I'm also conscious there's a lot of detailed questions on Slido around allowances and policies, and not in any way that I want to slope my shoulders, but we have the treat of having Helen Helliwell speak to us later. So perhaps some of those questions will be attended to in the sort of broader space.
Hiya, my name's Laura Dolphin. Sorry, I've got a question up on the board already. But talking about flexibility and bringing people and utilising their skill sets and things like that, I'm coming from a rather unique sense because I'm a veteran, my husband's still serving, so I'm looking at it from both parts and no number of people within the armed forces community. But we are losing our armed forces personnel that have got injuries. They are leaving the forces, taking all the skills with them, and then they haven't got that ability to come back and bring those skill sets with them because they're no longer fit and able to provide those services. But yet then what we are finding with our service persons is that there's the skill gap, because we are losing those people that have got those vast levels of experience. So they've got years of experience they're bringing to the table, and they're not able to then share that with the new people coming on board. And then really, there just isn't that communication of, well, can we utilise people that have had those injuries further within the armed forces and also within employers? So is that something that we're also thinking about, is actually we're losing so many people to injuries and mental health? Are we thinking about other ways that we could utilise those people?
Yeah. So whilst the others sort of take, let me just start with a little bit, and then I'll probably come to David at the end, who'll be, sorry, James, I'm getting my names mixed up there. So the first thing I would say is, without getting into the specifics of the cause of why people are going, what we are absolutely focused on is how do we make that spectrum of service, which I think people talked about this morning, the fluency between full-time regular service through to, every flavour that follows with it. As Zoe will tell you in a moment, I think there are currently 19 different forms of engagement that we have across the bit. Now, in many of those instances, we have the processes to get people to move between different types of levels of commitment, different periods of life, different health statuses. There is some of that. I would completely agree with you. I don't think we use it enough and well enough at the moment. So one of the things is just how do we get the fluency for people to be able to go backwards and forwards. The second bit is around creating a sort of national ecosystem for these skills. And one of the things that we're really focused on at the moment is starting with the national security ecosystem, so think other agencies, other parts of the sort of security infrastructure. How do we make it easier for people to move around within that context? So it's not a binary choice of leaving the armed forces, taking an air gap, thinking of joining the civil service or thinking of joining one of the agencies. It's trying to get much greater fluidity between those things. Candidly, it still surprises me that it is far easier on leaving the service to join the Home Office as a veteran than it is to join the Ministry of Defence. Those are things that we really need to get to. James, sorry.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, I meant to add as well that, of course, when somebody gets a certain injury, they're also finding that their career stops, because obviously when you're going through career progression at the lower end of being a soldier across the forces, they then can continue to improve, and then they get to a point where they might think, actually, do you know what, I'm going to leave now because I can't continue to go up within my career, and they've got all these levels of skills that they've got and they've obtained, but because their career stops at corporal, for example, they're not being utilised any further, whereas actually they could well be, but they might just not be able to be a fighting force person. So I'm just wondering, could there be a way of utilising those people in maybe another capacity rather than run the risk of losing them altogether?
Yeah, so, sorry, go on, sir.
I was actually just going to pick up the point on the work that we're doing on, we've heard about it today in terms of the spectrum or the continuum of service, and actually we need to look at that across the whole force. It's around kind of civilians, it's around regulars, it's around reserves, and Eldon's mentioned we have 19, probably more, different employment types within our organisation, and it's even the language is confusing. It's really difficult for individuals to understand the different ways in which they can be employed within defence. It's also really difficult for kind of employers within defence to use them because it's quite difficult and hard to navigate. So part of the work that we're doing is we are looking to streamline and simplify all of those different employment types. But then more importantly, it's about how do we make the movement between those different types much, much easier for people, so that when we have situations like that and their key skills and their experiences that we want to keep, we have choice and other options for how we can keep people within the organisation. So that's a huge thing that we're focused on at the moment. And it also links in again to the skills framework. So again, if we can think about somebody's skills within that continuum of service, where are they best placed, as well as the different employment type that we can put them into. I think all of those things together will hopefully converge to kind of how we use people and how we retain people in the organisation much more easily than we can today.
Because the mapping isn't just about the skills, but also about those other aspects which might make accessing workforce more imaginative. So, for example, understanding the premium on experience. So, if there is a premium on experience, you can't conduct a battle group combined arms attack if you've not been a company commander that's also been vested in it, for example. Then that person probably needs to come through the base fed model. Everything else can be conceived more imaginatively and laterally. The role of behaviours as well. So if the role is associated with the prosecution of the lethality, then that individual probably needs to be in uniformed service. Everyone else could be, a ununiformed service. So the mapping will really help us be much more imaginative about being able to offer workforce agility.
And there's one at the back of the room. I don't know if that's last row on the right-hand side.
Hi there. Thank you very much for all the answers so far and the introductions. So the organisation I'm currently working with is called Forces Horizon. We're looking at using AI, machine learning and big data applications to identify and represent military skills in a language that is digestible to civilian employers. That can also work the other way, so we can convert experience outside of the military into a language that makes sense within the military. And one element of that, so we have access to data from service leavers through other organisations, for example, a company called Thinking Decisions. What we're not so clear on is the MOD's policy on information which can be anonymised and through that can be secured through various means, but I was wondering if you might have any guidance on those sorts of data policies.
It's not quite where I thought your question was going to go, but on that, I think I'll ask Sam to start, and then we'll go down.
So the specifics of what you're after, you're going to get much better solutions as we work down the panel. I'll just sort of kick off with where we're starting to conceive AI has radical utility, where we think. So clearly, compressing what I described in Ukraine, that sort of the use of data and compressing the sensor to shooter timelines is something which offers huge utility. One of the barriers to the agility that I was talking about earlier is the massive documentation that pertain to service people, and we're about to put a load of that into a large language model and see if we can, what utility that has for us. We're also doing a similar thing in putting a whole load of source information into a sandbox to see if we can. We've just done this exercise with humans, so I'm about to compare how my humans do against the machine, which might disappoint all my humans. But in terms of the use of data, then I think Zoe and James are going to be all over your question.
So I'll go first on skills. So again, to talk about the skills framework, data is absolutely key. So we can have the best framework in the world, but actually it's only useful if we have the right data in it. So clearly that's a really big focus of ours at the moment. So I'd be interested to chat to you afterwards. Actually, I can't necessarily answer your direct question about kind of the rules around data, etc. But we're always looking for ways in which we can sort of more easily access data that's going to be useful for us, useful for industry, but more crucially, get us to that outcome that I described around how we use talent and skills kind of more fluidly across kind of the defence enterprise. So interested to have a chat after this.
Thanks. And I'll just add that the question and the conundrum around what you described is something we're very alive to. And General Eldon referred to it in his speech about the value of understanding your people through data and then being able to access it at the speed of relevance to make decisions linked to workforce, clearly in my case. So we have developed a pan-defence, so all parts of defence, civil and regular reservists, data system with Palantir Foundry, which has worked exceptionally well and for the first time given us information that we can access really, really quickly, i.e. minutes, rather than weeks before, at a relevance that is important for us to understand our business. But it's not just what Zoe's unpacking in terms of the language of the skills and how we describe them. It's also the foreign acronym soup and the way we've developed our dictionary, which is indecipherable when you start to go out into industry and people looking at skills requirements or CVs or portfolios or job adverts where we're probably not accessing the workforce to the extent we could do and the skills within, because people don't recognise what we're saying. So we have a duty to resolve that and work with industry to do that. Thank you.
I think the broader point about skills vocabulary is really important. And we did quite a bit of work with the Scottish government, actually, who have produced, if you like, a skills translator for service leavers. So they know exactly how their in-service skills translate across into civvy speak, if you like. And if we can roll that out across the rest of the UK, it's something we will try and do. But it also goes back to the point I made earlier about, where we can give civilian accreditation to military training courses, we absolutely should. And it's something I'm looking very hard at the moment.
I'm sorry I didn't catch your name, but it sounds as if probably linking up with Zoe and David after this would be useful to your specific question.
Yeah, 100%. So my name is Benedict Robb, currently at Force Horizon, did a few minutes in the Army and some stuff after that. Thank you for the answers.
Thank you. Any others in the room? And then I might come back onto the panel to the Slido question around the diversity. I'm not sure if Sam is talking to the conference. Yeah, one there, and right next to the microphone, so that's perfect. Thank you.
Hi, you mentioned a good point about skills. I own a recruitment company and I'm currently up from a gold award and I've been recruitment for 25 years. One of the biggest things I noticed in the transition is LCAS. The level 3 and the level 6 qualification seems to be completely dated when it comes to things like you mentioned skills. Say, for instance, if you look at the telecoms industry, a mini excavator is a required ticket for a construction company or say a streetwork company, but LCAS won't fund that because it's not a level 3 qualification. Has there ever been any thought to look at the funding that can be accessed for a transition forces personnel into the real world and actually remove the criteria for the qualification itself and just have funding to support training for skills that's needed? Because you mentioned there about Scottish government, there's a million jobs out there that don't require a level 3 qualification, but they do require certain certification to get that job. And the fundamental thing that I keep coming across is people even not even accessing their LCAS, because in Scotland it's a level 6. So has there ever been any look at the review of that, so that if I'm leaving the forces, I go, well, I want to be a plant driver, or whatever, whether I can access the funding that supports me getting that role?
So I think the issue of learning credits is a valid one, and it's quite a clunky system, and to a certain extent our hands are tied by central government, because it can be seen as a taxable benefit in kind if we don't apply certain sort of levels with it. There's a number of issues. I'm trying to make it more accessible by a broader range of learning providers at the moment. So a lot of learning providers just can't be bothered to register with it because it's too bureaucratic and process heavy. So we're trying to just make it a little bit easier. You've got to be fairly careful, because we've had our fingers burnt recently with a learning provider that actually went bust when a load of people are going through it. So there is a need to make sure there are certain checks and balances in place. The level 3 bit's really interesting, actually, because central government will let us lower the bar a bit if there is a national shortage of skills. And HGV driving is one case where we did lower the bar because there was such a shortage of truck drivers. We spoke to the Cabinet Office and they said, yeah, absolutely, because truck driving is not a level 3 qualification. They said you can lower the bar. So when it's linked to a national skills shortage, we can lower the bar. But every time we do that, it involves quite complicated bureaucratic policy decisions with central government. But I hear you loud and clear, and also the bit about making sure we take account of the different levels in Scotland, which I totally get are a completely different framework. So we're working on it, but our hands are tied to a certain extent by the Cabinet Office and the Treasury as well.
I think it also sounds as if we could be clear in our communication as to why certain things aren't in that bracket as well. And there's probably something around that. Any others in the room at all? Yeah, great.
Thank you. I'm Rachel Evans from Sodexo. My question is up there, actually. I think in the context of everything that we've heard today and shifting the culture, shifting the conversation, I'm really keen to understand how senior military leaders are tapping into emerging talent. I think there's a need to shift that conversation and key decision making at a strategic level. So I'm just interested to understand how that might be happening.
I'll look to see if anybody wants to pick. I'm very happy to come back. Rachel, thank you for that. In terms of how it is, I think there's a formal bit and there's an informal element to it. Formally, we're seeing increasing numbers of challenge boards, red teams, reverse mentors. There's a whole range of different ways in which there's a sort of formal structure for that. But my argument throughout my career has always been that the formal structures will only take you so far, and fundamentally it's about how well connected we are as a leadership with the organisation at every level. So getting out and about, to every single part of the organisation, I think is one of the key things for it. And just finding opportunities, making sure that we are consistently encouraging people to have a voice in that conversation. Some of the most brutal moments I go to are things like the sort of intermediate command and staff course at the Army, where they're definitely wound up to give you their sort of sense in that space. But it's much more, as you say, it's much more about generating that conversation that we can have it. And then there will be some formal ways that you can pull it through. We've got a range of formal mechanisms. We've got a range of talent schemes that we advance people and accelerate people through on that sort of side. So I think it's a sort of combination of all of those. I'm probably not going to give you the answer you were looking for, but my sense is that we have definitely identified that as a really strong part to do. I don't know whether anybody else wants to pick up.
I think
James.
I'd sort of just add, and might give a personal example to put myself out there, but I think we have a culture that provides the systemic place for people to develop a meritocracy and get on. And the reason why, and the education offer and the wider incentivisation we have as part of the sort of DNA of service life promotes that. And the personal example I would give is I joined the Royal Air Force 33 years ago as an airman. And you could say, was I emerging talent as I came through the ranks, and now I've reached Air Commodore? But the system within which I joined has helped me all the way through and pushed me. But there is a bit of personal ownership in that as well, in terms of that talent being recognised and stepping forward. Thank you.
Can I also add to that and just give an example of something we've done over the last couple of years? So one of the challenges, I think, to doing that and doing that better is that in defence, we can be fairly siloed in terms of what we do and how we operate. And I'm seeing quite a few nods in the audience on that comment. And one of the things that we did in recognition that we need to develop our female talent in particular a lot more was that 2 years ago we developed a programme. It was a suite of interventions around kind of female talent development at all levels. But at the most senior level, what we did, and it might seem a really simple idea, but it was completely different for defence, is that we took our kind of top most sort of highest potential kind of females across all three of the single services and put them in one consistent programme. And that was the first time we did that tri-service, which was only 2 years ago. And we're already seeing the benefits of that, not only in terms of quite frankly, the exceptional feedback that we're getting from the people that went on that programme, but we're seeing that follow through with the roles that they're now getting. We're creating more of a network for people and females at that level within the organisation. So things like that are really trying to move the dial, and it's also our way of recognising that we do need to do more in that space.
I also think there's something about more flexible education pathways that allow people to progress. A lot of us on the stage here progressed through a system whereby if you didn't go and attend the Advanced Command and Staff course by the time you were sort of 40, the chances of making it to sort of group captain in my case were pretty slim. So the Defence Academy are working really hard at the moment to make a lot of the content of their flagship courses available to anybody that wants to take part in it. And for a lot of people, especially if they want to have a family, the time at which you would go on a year-long residential course is absolutely about the worst time in life you would choose to do it. So it's not very diverse either. It's pretty exclusive. So we're working quite hard at the moment to make sure promotion is not tied to just attending specified professional military education courses at the Defence Academy, but also there's other ways of accessing the education and also the education you need to do the job. I mean, if you're going to be an HR specialist, going and spending a year doing sort of operational campaign planning at Shrivenham is probably not the best use of your time if you're going to go and look after HR policy. There's a lot to get after in that space.
Thank you. I think we've probably got time for one more, and I'll take it from the room. Yeah. Near the back. I don't know if somebody's got a microphone. Good chat. Here we are.
Good afternoon. Andy Jackson from Savills. I think I've heard today about service leavers that understand the path they're going to take when they leave. But what we're seeing in our recent experience, and I talk particularly about my colleagues sitting next to me, is there is still plenty of service leavers that are overwhelmed when they leave the service. They don't know the direction they're going to go in, and we as society is losing them. There are employers like us that would like to get access to them earlier. I've got some Royal Engineers coming to us on a 6-week secondment who have still got 4 years left to serve. Is that been considered across all services?
Yeah, so we provide resettlement provision through the Career Transition Partnership contract, which we're literally midway through reletting at the moment, and the tender process is ongoing. That's provided a really good opportunity to just look at the requirement of that to make sure we've got it right. And the feedback we get from people going through resettlement at the moment is that the current resettlement provision is pretty good, but there's always room for improvement. And we're going to try and weave that into the contract relet. We also try and continuously improve the service that we offer. But obviously, the longer you stay in, the better resettlement package you get. And what we don't want to do is reward people by giving them a load of resettlement stuff to leave early. So there has to be some kind of retention incentive attached to, if you stay in a bit longer, we will prepare you better for life in the future. But I think the overall program does a reasonable job, especially with the career transition workshop, where you spend about 3 days thinking about, you know, what's going to get you out of bed in the morning in your next career, where your skills lie, how you write CVs, sell yourself on LinkedIn, look for jobs, and they get a lot of help in searching for jobs as well. We can always do it better. I totally get that.
I'd agree that it's as best as it's ever been. Certainly, I don't know, in the last 25 years, something like that. But certainly can do better. I understand why the view of the panel would be, well, actually, you know, if we talk about a 22-year career, then you know you're going to get the best. You'll get the best chance when you come out. But I think, you know, from our point of view in business, saying actually the guys and girls that are 5-year services, we still want to put them to work. You know, I went to a prison 2 weeks ago, and I start seeing you know, guys from 2 Rifles, my regiment, in the prison. That's what I want to put a stop to, and it needs to, I think, understand that it's not just 22-year, in my case, riflemen. You know, I want to get the guys that have come out a little bit earlier than that and get them out of the nick and get them into skills in probably businesses right across there. I'm sorry if my question was a little bit controversial. I can see people turning around looking at me.
It's not controversial at all.
Don't give a green jacket a mic, probably, is the lesson.
And we're always looking to have chats with employers who want to carve out pathways. You know, we've got lots of arrangements in place with, you know, some of the big sort of city companies, with a lot of the banks, lots of logistics companies, about specified pathways for service leavers into employment with those companies, which includes people doing internships in their last sort of 6 months of service. And if you want to come and chat to me afterwards in the break, more than happy to do so. Yeah.
I'm now getting real daggers from off to my left in terms of time. Ladies and gentlemen, a huge thank you for your engagement and your questions. I'm sorry that we couldn't take every single one of them, but please do catch any of the 5 of us in the next little bit if there are specific follow-ups to go. And thank you for your engagement today. Thanks.